Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling defeated, even after articulating your points perfectly? Experienced that tightening in your throat? A sense that each word uttered chipped away at your inner strength? Perhaps you're constantly surrounded by those who speak over others, interrupt, ridicule, and dominate conversations with an arrogance masquerading as confidence. Perhaps you've internalized the belief that silence equates to weakness, that not defending yourself is surrender, that a lack of reaction signifies defeat. But what if this is all a grand illusion? What if true power resides not in the spoken word, but in its strategic absence? Nietzsche, a philosopher often misinterpreted, recognized a truth few dare to acknowledge. Those who speak incessantly reveal too much. Those compelled to convince are already operating from a position of weakness. We are taught to fight, to justify our every stance, to defend our ideas as if every dialogue is a battle for truth. Yet, nature offers a different approach, a subtler, more potent, and infinitely more astute path. Nietzsche believed silence isn't merely the absence of sound, but a powerful presence. Silence disrupts, destabilizes, and compels introspection. This message is for those who feel perpetually overlooked, overshadowed, and unheard. For those who leave conversations feeling misunderstood. For those weary of being the easy target, the accommodating peacekeeper exploited by others. Perhaps you've mistaken your silence for submission. Today, we'll explore how silence can become your greatest asset, how true victory lies not in winning arguments, but in transcending the need to engage in them. Prepare to perceive silence not as a lack of response, but as the ultimate response. Let's delve into Nietzsche's philosophy and uncover the art of mastering any situation without uttering a single word. Why do we feel compelled to respond, to refute, to rectify, to incessantly prove our correctness? Because we've been conditioned to believe truth requires fervent defense, that silence implies acquiescence, a concession of victory to the opposition. Nietzsche recognized this as a symptom of profound insecurity, the fear of appearing weak. And at the root of this fear lies the ego, a fragile construct that crumbles under scrutiny, that conflates disagreement with personal attack, transforming every conversation into a war zone. Nietzsche argued that most individuals don't seek truth in arguments. They seek dominance. They seek to validate their beliefs, not because those beliefs are inherently sound, but because their entire framework collapses if challenged. Argumentation, in this context, isn't a tool of wisdom, but a defensive mechanism, a desperate plea from the ego to maintain control of the narrative. The implication? The moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, to prove your point, you've already entered the opponent's arena and conceded defeat. The mere need to defend your position reveals your entanglement in the desire for acceptance, validation, and understanding. Nietzsche termed this herd morality, the behavior of those who live according to the expectations of others, perpetually seeking approval and validation. This pursuit of external validation is the very source of your weakness. True strength, according to Nietzsche, resides not in persuading others, but in liberating yourself from the need to do so. It lies in upholding your convictions even in the face of ridicule, criticism, and rejection. It lies in remaining steadfast even when misunderstood. Nietzsche proposes a different kind of power, one not measured in verbal victories, but in internal mastery, a power derived from the ability to remain composed while others succumb to chaos, a power that flourishes when you cease to react impulsively. To truly triumph, you must grasp this. The game of argumentation is a theatrical performance, and the first to step onto the stage has already lost. Nietzsche understood that a reactive mind is a subservient mind. The observant mind, That is the true force to be reckoned with, because it transcends the need to prove anything. But if we shouldn't react, how do we exert influence? If words betray us, how do we convey strength without uttering a single phrase? Nietzsche's answer lies in the concept of the Übermensch, the individual who transcends the constraints of conventional morality and achieves dominance through absolute self-mastery. In the next segment, we will explore this archetype and understand how it embodies the strategic deployment of silence as an instrument of power. Are you prepared to ascend to this level? Because from this point forward, silence begins to speak volumes. If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Nietzsche didn't write for the faint of heart. His words are for those with the courage to confront their inner demons and transmute them into strength. He believed the average person is ensnared by societal conventions, moralistic constraints, and the insatiable need for external validation. But there exists another breed, rare, formidable, and free. The Übermensch, or Overman, doesn't merely react to the world, he shapes it according to his own vision. And the most remarkable aspect? He often achieves this through the profound power of silence. The Übermensch doesn't engage in trivial debates or petty emotional games. He observes, he comprehends, and he meticulously chooses when to speak and, more importantly, when to remain silent. He understands a truth often overlooked. Silence is a language in itself, a language that doesn't seek to persuade, but to command attention. The Übermensch's silence isn't empty. It exudes an aura of implicit threat, authority, and self-mastery. While others clamor for attention, he commands respect with a mere glance. While others offer lengthy explanations, he observes, exposing their weaknesses through his unwavering composure. His silence is an impenetrable wall, leaving others to grapple with the unknown, to desperately decipher what lies hidden beneath the surface. And in their desperation, they falter, reveal too much, and lose their footing. This silence isn't passivity, it's the epitome of self-control, a strategic conservation of energy. The Übermensch understands that every word uttered is a tactical move revealed, every emotional reaction a vulnerability exposed. Therefore, he remains silent. Not because he lacks anything to say, but because he has transcended the need to say anything at all. His presence speaks volumes. It unsettles, compelling others to confront their own internal noise. In a society saturated with noise, those who master silence reign supreme. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as an individual who forges his own values, his own rules, his own moral compass. He is independent of external validation, and that is the source of his power. Nothing is more destabilizing than an individual impervious to manipulation through guilt, fear, or the need for acceptance. His silence is a shield against these manipulative tactics, and when he does speak, his words carry the weight of empires. But this raises a crucial question. What makes silence so unsettling? Why does it evoke such a strong sense of threat? What transpires within the human psyche when anticipated confrontation is replaced by an overwhelming absence? The answer lies in the realm of psychology, which we will explore in the next segment. To grasp the power of silence, we must first understand the turmoil it creates in the minds of others. And trust me, it runs far deeper than you might imagine. Silence isn't merely the absence of sound. It's a mirror. And for many, what it reflects is deeply unsettling. By choosing not to react, you're not just silencing yourself. You're compelling the other person to confront their own internal dialogue, to examine their arguments without the crutch of external resistance. And that is profoundly destabilizing, because most people don't speak to genuinely express themselves. They speak to defend themselves, to convince themselves, to conceal the chasm between their words and their true selves. Your silence strips away their facade. Social psychology demonstrates that in confrontational scenarios, silence is often perceived as judgment. Even if you're genuinely listening, the speaker feels exposed, vulnerable. Why? Because without your response, without your reaction, they lose control of the narrative. The human brain enters a state of heightened alert. The amygdala, the seat of fear and anxiety, fires up. The other person projects their own insecurities onto you. Are they judging me? Did they perceive my vulnerability? Do they know I'm bluffing? In this psychological arena, silence becomes an invisible weapon, striking unseen yet deeply felt. Nietzsche grasped this long before modern psychology confirmed it. He believed the average person is enslaved by their reactivity, driven by impulse, vanity, and the fear of fading into obscurity. The superior individual, the master of self, cultivates silence, understanding that every word uttered is ammunition for the enemy, every emotional reaction an involuntary cry revealing a point of attack. Furthermore, silence has a particularly disarming effect on manipulators. Those who thrive on emotional control depend on your reactions to maintain their power. Your non-reaction disrupts their game, triggering panic. They need your response to validate their position. Without it, they flounder, their carefully constructed mask of control slipping, revealing the very weakness they strive to conceal. But there's a deeper layer still. Silence can also unearth unresolved pain, triggering buried traumas of rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. Suddenly, the other person is confronted with the realization that they are not the center of the universe, that their words hold no sway, that their presence makes no impact. And for the narcissistic ego, this is an unbearable truth. Therefore, when you choose silence, you're not merely defending yourself, you're striking at the very core of their illusion. This is why silence demands strength. It's uncomfortable, not just for the other person, but for you as well. It goes against every ingrained impulse to react, to justify, to explain. But that's precisely what makes it so potent. It requires mastery, and mastery is the essence of true power. Now that you understand how silence operates within the minds of others, how it triggers insecurities, dismantles defenses, and exposes pretenses, it's time to elevate your understanding. It's time to transcend observation and become a conscious wielder of this potent force. In the next segment, you'll discover how to transform silence into a deliberate weapon, how to triumph in any argument without uttering a single word. And when you master this art, no one will hold power over you. The time has come to move beyond theoretical understanding and embrace practical application. Knowledge without action is sterile. From this point forward, you will learn to wield silence with precision, not as a defensive shield, but as a finely honed blade, capable of piercing through facades at the most unexpected moments. The first step is deceptively simple, yet profoundly challenging. Remain silent when every fiber of your being screams for a response. This requires immense strength because every instinct will urge you to react, to justify, to prove your righteousness. But that impulse is toxic. Each time you succumb to it, you reveal your vulnerability to external control, your dependence on the opinions of others, your continued participation in their game. True silence arises only when you extinguish that need, when you recognize that you owe no explanations, that truth doesn't require vocalization to exist. The second weapon in your arsenal of silence is observation. While others speak, lost in their own explanations, desperately trying to fill the void with words, you listen. But you don't listen passively, waiting for your turn to speak. You listen with the focused attention of a predator tracking its prey. You perceive the unspoken fears, the subtle contradictions, the insecurities masked by arrogance. You gather this intel because when you do speak, if you choose to speak, your words will be surgical, delivered with the precision of one who has mapped the emotional terrain of their opponent. The third weapon, time. Master the art of the pregnant pause. Silence creates tension, and tension is power. As the other person speaks, anticipating your reaction, the absence of response creates an internal implosion. Discomfort escalates, their mind racing to fill the void with assumptions, anxieties, and paranoia. A simple glance, coupled with silence, can be more impactful than a barrage of words. The fourth weapon, unpredictability. Mastery of silence renders you unpredictable. And unpredictability breeds fear, because others lose their footing, unsure of what to expect. This uncertainty shifts the balance of power. They become cautious, meticulously weighing their words. You invert the dynamics of interaction. From reactive, you become the gravitational center of the conversation. At this stage, silence isn't absence, it's pure dominance. But a word of caution: don't confuse silence with passivity. NZE never advocated for weakness. The silence we're discussing is active, potent, charged with intention. You're not withholding, you're strategizing, choosing your moment, positioning yourself with a strength that doesn't need to be displayed to be felt. And when the opportune moment arrives, when silence has already spoken volumes, you can deliver a single, decisive remark, a precise observation that concludes the discussion. Not because it was louder, but because it was more truthful, more profound, more undeniable. But this leads us to an even more critical point. Thus far, we've focused on using silence offensively. But there are times when the objective isn't to win, but to simply survive emotionally. There are situations where people aren't merely debating with you. They're using you, manipulating you, draining your energy. And you, unknowingly, are surrendering your power. Every day, you're being dominated without a single word being spoken. And this is where we encounter the darkest aspect of this journey. When silence is no longer a strategy, but a stifled cry for help from someone who has lost control. In the next segment, we will expose this truth, revealing how you might be unknowingly exploited. Because while you believe you're avoiding conflict, someone may be building an empire upon your silence. And NZ understood this implicitly. Is there anything more insidious than being silenced? Than being conditioned to believe that silence is your only recourse? That suppressing your anger, conceding in arguments, and avoiding conflict at all costs is a sign of maturity? That remaining silent equates to emotional equilibrium? What if this is a carefully constructed trap? What if, in many instances, this type of silence isn't wisdom, but a subtle form of submission? NZ saw this with piercing clarity. What you perceive as peace is often merely a carefully crafted surrender. Have you observed how some individuals exploit your tranquility, your willingness to listen, to overlook, to avoid confrontation? They push their agendas, impose their will, encroach upon your space, and you allow it. You rationalize it as maintaining harmony, as not worth the effort of resistance, as a trivial matter. But the truth is, you're paying a steep price for this counterfeit peace. And worse, you're being exploited by those who recognize your reluctance to react. NZ spoke of slave morality, a value system constructed by the weak to navigate a world dominated by the strong. It's the morality of resignation, of guilt, of perpetual niceness, an unspoken code that compels you to diminish yourself, to conform, and to delude yourself into believing this is virtuous. But Nietzsche didn't write for those who resign themselves to their fate. He wrote for those who dare to break free from these shackles, for those who recognize their exploitation and refuse to participate in their own subjugation. When you embrace this type of silence, the silence that consumes you from within, you relinquish your power. Unconsciously, you allow yourself to be molded by the expectations of others. You cease to be yourself. You become what others need you to be. And this is the antithesis of what Nietzsche termed the will to power. Because true will to power isn't about shouting or dominating others. It's about self-mastery. It's about reclaiming control of your own narrative. It's about choosing silence not out of fear, but because you are beholden to no one. This silence of submission must be eradicated. And in its place, the silence of presence must be cultivated. The silence that refuses to bend, to be humiliated, to apologize for existing. The silence that stands firm amidst chaos and, without uttering a word, alters the course of events. This is the silence Nietzsche would admire, the silence of the individual who has achieved true self-mastery. But how do you attain this level of mastery? How do you transition from being manipulated to becoming the architect of your own presence? How do you dismantle the internalized slave morality and emerge as someone who commands authority even in silence? The answer lies in the most potent archetype of Nietzsche's philosophy, the Übermensch. We've touched upon this concept before. Now, it's time to understand how to embody it. In this final chapter, we will explore what it takes to embody this new breed of human being. Because the world doesn't need more voices clamoring for attention. It needs those who have mastered the art of silence and wield it with wisdom. We've arrived at the culmination of our journey, and now, more than ever, it's crucial that you grasp this fundamental truth. Silence is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is not merely a pause between words. True silence is pure presence. It is mastery. It is the embodiment of no longer reacting to the world, but shaping it through the sheer force of your being. Nietzsche didn't write for those content with mere survival. He wrote for those who aspire to transcend, for those willing to shed the masks imposed by society, regardless of the discomfort. The silence of the Übermensch isn't the silence of the oppressed or the cowardly. It's the silence of the warrior who has already secured victory before the battle even begins. It's the stillness of one who has transcended the need for external validation because they possess unwavering self-knowledge. And perhaps most importantly, they know their worth. Now, reflect on your own life. How often have you chosen silence out of fear, guilt, or a reluctance to disrupt the status quo? How many times have you allowed others to dictate your choices, to speak for you, to trample upon your truth? Enough. Nietzsche would argue that such a life is an affront to existence itself, that embracing this type of silence is a betrayal of your own being. From this day forward, let your silence resonate with a different energy. Let it cease to be a refuge and become a silent declaration of your sovereignty, a boundary, an affirmation of self, even if it remains misunderstood. Because who you are doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be expressed. And that requires courage. Do you possess that courage? Then declare it below. I choose the silence that commands respect. Not just for my benefit, but as a public declaration of your commitment to yourself. Because words hold power, even when they speak of silence. And don't stop here. The next video is essential for your continued growth. It will expand upon what you've learned here and propel your understanding even further. Watch it, not for me, but for yourself. because you deserve to transcend. And remember, the weak shout, the strong are silent, and the wise choose their moment.